Something strange has happened to the dollar, and it's unlike anything we have ever seen before. Ever since President Trump took office, the world economy is in chaos. On 1st of February, he announced a 25% tariff on everything that comes from Mexico and Canada. On 2nd of April, he announced a universal tariff on any goods that enter the United States, and reciprocal tariffs that went as high as 245% for some countries. That chaos spilled into the bond market, and that forced investors to sell their investments fast. And now Moody's, the most respected rating agency in the world, has downgraded the United States credit score. That will cost the United States hundreds of billions of dollars, wiping out any potential profits that the United States would have made out of those tariffs. It's like when you're running a business and you raise your prices to make more money, and then your landlord triples your rent. That's just what happened with the US government, and that could have a devastating impact on the United States dollar as the global currency reserve. Let me ask you, what is the most powerful company in the world? BlackRock, that controls over $10 trillion under management? Or maybe Wall Street, which is the most respected bank on Wall Street? Or how about Apple, a $3 trillion company that shapes the way we live? What if I told you that there is a company that is more powerful than all of these companies combined, and it's called Moody's? Most people have no idea how truly powerful this company is. This company can single-handedly destroy entire banks and companies, and even in some cases, countries. You see, countries, just like people, have credit scores. The higher your credit score, the cheaper for you to borrow money. But the lower is your credit score, the more you pay to borrow money. If investors believe that a country is reckless with their finances, then their credit scores go down, which means that their interest payments instantly go higher. A good score means lower rates, a higher score means you're gonna pay much more. A $400,000 mortgage can cost an extra $100,000 just because you have a lower credit score. And that's why you should maintain, or try your best to maintain, a very good credit score if you want to get as rich as possible. Remember Silicon Valley Bank, one of the largest banks in the United States, and probably the largest bank for tech startups in Silicon Valley. It had assets worth over $300 billion, and most of those assets were invested in some of the safest assets out there, such as the US government bonds. But with a single move, when the Moody's downgraded SVB's credit score, the bank went into bankruptcy in less than 48 hours. Investors panicked, they rushed to SVB and pulled out their investments, and that led to the crash of one of the largest banks in the United States. Same thing happened in 2008. Mortgage-backed securities and collateralized debt obligations, which were very toxic products that were filled with risky home loans, were given AAA ratings by Moody's. So pension funds, investors, and banks threw trillions of dollars into these very risky assets. But at the end of the day, when Moody's pulled the plug and triggered and downgraded those assets, investors panicked and instantly started selling these assets, which led to the catastrophe. It was the main reason why the Lehman Brothers collapsed, and the global economy was on the brink of catastrophe just because Moody's downgraded these assets. Imagine one company is so powerful that they almost destroyed the entire global financial system just because of a few letters on a rating sheet. And now they have turned their attention to the United States. What is the total debt of the US government? It's almost $37 trillion. And I'm afraid to say $37 trillion because maybe by the end of the video it might be $38 trillion, $40 trillion, God knows how much it's going to be. And now since Moody's downgraded the US credit score, that means higher debt payments. A single percentage increase in interest payments for the United States means an extra $370 billion in annual payments. And that's just this year alone. And as the debt keeps growing, that annual payment is going to keep rising. $37 trillion debt is like 37 million credit cards maxed out at $1 million. Can you even comprehend those kind of numbers? Most people, when they hear these numbers, they do not fully understand what exactly those numbers mean. Here's how Moody's explained it in their own report. Successive US administration and Congress have failed to agree on measures to reverse the trend of large annual fiscal deficits and growing interest costs. Let's translate that to a human language. Both Democrats and Republicans have been kicking the can for the last 25 years, and they haven't agreed on major policies that could change the trend and start cutting costs. And there is absolutely nothing that the US government can do right now in the short run to fix the problem. You want to cut spending? It puts at risk its status as the superpower. If it continues borrowing, its debt will keep growing until it buries it. So what exactly the United States can do right now, or supposed to do? In December 2021, Biden raised the debt ceiling by $2.5 trillion. In June 2023, they're supposed to raise the debt ceiling again by trillions of dollars, but then they decided that they will delay it. And now Trump has no other option but to increase the debt ceiling again by trillions of dollars. And guess what? Republicans are not going to agree on an increase of debt ceiling unless they will approve a $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. Let's take that and translate it to a human language. More borrowing and more debt and more interest payments. By the time Trump is going to leave office, the total debt of the United States will be around $48 trillion. And if we assume that the GDP of the United States will increase to $33 trillion, then the US debt to GDP ratio is going to be around 145%. And now, since Moody's have downgraded the United States credit score, it means it's probably going to grow to $50 trillion and a debt to GDP ratio of around 150%. That's like making $100,000 but having credit card debts at $150,000. And that does not include your mortgage and your car payments. That is the biggest threat that the US dollar is facing as the global currency reserve. Despite all the attempts to cut spending, 2025 is going to be financial disaster for the United States. Now, the budget for the United States is $7.3 trillion for this year. And the United States will make $5.2 trillion, which creates a shortfall of over $2 trillion. Can you imagine for a moment that this year alone the United States will borrow an extra $2.1 trillion just to fill the budget? If this trend continues for the entire presidency of Trump, just like it did during Biden, then the United States is on a crash course. But here is where it gets much worse. Ever since 1945, whenever there has been any kind of crisis, investors would rush to the United States and they would invest their money in the US government bonds, since they were considered as safe as gold, if not safer than gold. And that's why during any crisis, gold prices rise. That's exactly what's happening right now. If you check gold prices for the past couple of years, they have been rising since there have been so much chaos in the world. And secondly, bond yields on the US government bonds start to fall down. But that did not happen during the last crisis on April the 2nd, when the United States announced universal tariffs on all the world. In fact, investors started massively selling US government bonds. Yields represent the interest rate that the United States has to offer to borrow money. So when the demand rises, yields naturally drop. The government has to offer very little when everybody wants to lend it money. If everyone wants to lend you money, then you have to offer very little in exchange. But if nobody wants to lend you money, then you have to offer a much higher reward for anyone to loan you even a small loan. So on April the 2nd, when the United States announced universal tariffs on everybody, the absolute opposite has happened. Yield rates started to rise instead of going down. It's as if your house was the safest place during any crisis, but during the last tornado, instead of people running to your house, they started running away. And that's a huge danger for the US dollar, because the United States does not borrow millions of dollars. It borrows trillions of dollars. And a downgrade by Moody's means that the cost of borrowing from now onwards is going to exponentially rise. And that could also mean that the era of cheap money is over forever for the United States. No longer low interest rates for the United States. And that means that everything will become more expensive. Groceries, mortgages, cars, whatever you buy is simply going to become much more expensive, which means that You either can simply sit down and watch how inflation is going to eat away your money, or you can do what rich people do during these times: invest. The greatest wealth transformation never happened during the good times. They always happen during crises. In 2008, when everything started to crash, smart investors jumped in and bought some really great assets at a fraction of the price. In 2020, when everything started to crash, really smart investors were patient and they made a lot of money during the recovery. But people have all of these questions in their mind because they're confused about investing. How do I know which stock should I buy? How do I know which investing strategy fits me? How do I know how to analyze stocks and become a professional investor? Because of all of these questions, most people never start investing. So if you want answers to all of these questions, then there is a link in the description of this video that can help you out. If you're interested, you can go and check it out. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.